Welcome, everybody, and welcome for joining me here at Habitat Now. My name is Aaron Shea, and I am honored today to share the life, work, and career of honorary legendary artist Steve Linn. Steve has been a part of the Habitat family since before the gallery started, I think. He's been around way before my time, and I have seen his work, and it's always been impressive, and he's always pushed the glass medium beyond barriers, and he's trained in so many different skill sets, and he combines all these amazing skills he has to create sculpture and homage of people that impress him, and he'll talk about more of that during the presentation. So off the bat, I want to welcome Steve, say hi to everybody, and join us.
Well, hi, everybody. I would like to toast you all with a nice sip of local wine. And I'm glad you're all here. And it's so nice to see so many friends. And without further ado, let's get rolling.
All right, Steve, I'm going to take over everybody's screen here and be able to show our presentation. So relax and enjoy yourselves, and I'm looking forward to this. So I welcome you to Habitat Now. Click through that. This is our wonderful invitation for this week, and you'll see one for next week at the end of this presentation. Thank you again, Steve, for joining us. And his wife, Karen, is also here. Hi, Karen.
Love.
Good to see you. So we have a very special announcement that's really important to talk about near the end of this presentation. So stick around. It's something exclusive being offered to the members who attend this Zoom online live. So we're going to show a quick video of Steve Linn giving us a tour of his home and in France. Here we go.
Hi, my name is Steve Linn. Welcome to my studio here in Claret, France, and welcome also to Habitat Direct. Claret is a village which is 30 kilometers north of Montpellier and about 35 kilometers west of Nîmes. This is a beautiful part of the world, and through this video I'd like to show you a little bit about the outside of my studio. We have a little herd of Camargue horses right adjacent. Claret is in kind of a bowl and surrounded by what is known as the Coste d'Artus. Come on in and let's have a look. This building is an old agricultural building that was used to make fertilizer from chicken droppings. It was abandoned about 35 years ago and laid vacant for a long time. When we first moved to France 27 years ago, I rented the adjacent space to where we are now as my first studio here. It is now occupied by Freddie Bornix, who is a cabinet maker and my close friend. This is my oven for kiln casting, and it is specifically built for that purpose. The kind of molds that I use are open face molds, so the resistance is on the top and is used to heat the glass in that fashion. What we can't see in this space is the back half of the studio. Because it was necessary to install the two sculptures for the Habitat International, I had to block off the back part of the studio, which houses my sandblasting room, my compressor, and the dust collector for the sandblasting. So what we can do now is go upstairs. This is where all the planning is done, where I do my drawings and sketches and contemplation for the work. What's really important is that every studio needs to have a comfortable chair. And this chair is where I sit and I look at things and try to decide what works and what doesn't work. So here we have the two sketches for the sculptures which were going to be in the International. This is the first piece is called Four Sketches on Dances by Alvin Ailey, and the second piece is called Gesamtkunstwerk, and is about the German artist Joseph Beuys. We can also see around the room drawings for previous pieces. Okay, here's the real piece on Four Sketches on Dances by Alvin Ailey. Alvin Ailey is an African-American choreographer who studied with Katherine Dunham, and he formed a dance company in the late 1960s, and it's still going today, although he passed away and is now under the direction of other dancers and choreographers. I chose four dances that he actually choreographed, although the company does perform works by other choreographers. The four dances are Pas de Deux, which is a Pas de Deux, which is for two dancers, Jazz Suite, Revelations, which was a piece for the entire company, and Cry, a solo, which was normally performed by Judith Jameson. The piece is called Gesamtkunstwerk, which means art which encompasses all art forms, and is about the German artist Joseph Beuys. He's known for being part of the Fluxus movement, for doing happenings, and for environmental art. The materials in the piece are felt, aluminum, wood, and glass. Felt was a material which appeared frequently in Joseph Beuys's work, and one of his most famous pieces is a felt suit, which is a wall hanging. Here we have the hat, which is his signature, a sled, which is part of his personal history, and an oak seedling, which was part of an environmental and participatory piece he did for Document 7 in Germany called 7,000 Oak Trees. And it involved a bunch of people helping him plant 7,000 oak trees as an environmental project.
That is a deep dive into what Steve provided us for the International. I'm going to stop sharing right now so we can all see Steve. And if you're not on speaker mode, feel free to switch from your view to speaker view to pay it to so you can see Steve's face full on. All right, Steve, I'm going to welcome you. Welcome.
Well, it's nice to be here. And if you could put up the first slide of the beginning so
Sure.
that I could.
I will do it right now. I'll get it going again. All right, close this. Sharing my screen, and there you go, Steve.
Okay, well, I would like to tell everybody that today we're launching my new website, which is a vast improvement over the old one. And I'm extremely lucky because I have an incredible in-house web designer in my wife, Karen Lehrer. And she is a fine arts graduate of Cooper Union in New York and a graphic designer, web designer, and also a fantastic musician. Next. And this is my family. This is what makes my mojo work. Karen and our beautiful daughter, Katie. Katie lives in Paris, and she's in the National Police, and she is a soccer goalie of very high order, and has played in the professional women's leagues here in France. Next. Here we go. A little flash to the past. This is my first solo exhibition 51 years ago in Oklahoma City. And first of all, before we go any further, I would like to fill you in a little bit about my background. I was born in Chicago, and my father was a high school woodshop teacher. And he, through much cajoling on my part, started me working with tools when I was very young, 4 or 5 years old. And sadly, he passed away when I was 13, which led to a rather turbulent adolescence. And when it was time for me to go to college, my high school grades weren't so great, but I needed a scholarship. And I looked around and I found a scholarship that no one had taken for 10 years in agriculture. And I took it. I was a city kid. I had no knowledge of agriculture, but it was my key to the university and to a liberal arts education on the side. And while I was in college, there were virtually no women in the ag school, so I needed to find something as a social activity. So I got involved in theater, first as a performer, and later on as a designer. And the other thing that happened to me while I was in college is that my roommates, the people that I shared a house with, were all art majors. And that gave me access to the art studios and the sculpture studios at the University of Illinois in Champaign, where I went to school. And my involvement in the theater got me to an application which I luckily received for a grant, which I luckily received as an assistant designer at Arena Stage in Washington, D.C. And at Arena Stage in Washington, I met Robin Wagner. I was Robin's first assistant, and Robin has gone on to an extremely illustrious career as a designer of Broadway musicals. He's won 3 Tony Awards. He designed Hair, Jesus Christ Superstar, 20th Century, et cetera, et cetera. And Robin gave me a great piece of sage advice. And that advice was to not pursue theater design as a career, but to pursue sculpture. And the reason being is that theater demands a great deal of compromise. And in the scope of things, once I got an idea, I was kind of locked onto it, and it was very difficult for me to compromise. So his advice was to pursue sculpture as my career. And I continued to work in the theater for a number of years, but on the technical end, where I wasn't in charge of designing sets or costumes or lighting, I was just making the designs of others function. And after Arena Stage in Washington, I went to Oklahoma City. And that's where you saw the poster from the show. Could you put it up? And like I say, this was my first one-person show. And this was also the last real theater job that I had. I decided at this point that I was going to go to find a job in sculpture. And I made a trip and I went to 40 colleges proposing that I become a technical instructor in sculpture. Since I didn't have a bachelor's or master's in fine arts, colleges would be reluctant to hire me as a teacher of a regular sculpture teacher, but to teach just the technical subjects or skills. So I taught welding, and I ran a foundry, and I got a job at the University of California at Santa Cruz. So I spent 3 years there, And from there, in my first year there, I decided that all of the sculpture work I had done up until that time was kind of work that I did to grow up and to become an artist and to try to find my voice. And at 28 years old, I took everything that I had made up until that point to the dump and got rid of it all. And began from there the sculpture that has become what you all are familiar with. Next slide. This is a little bit later, but this is me in the foundry at the American Academy in Rome in 1975. I won the Prix de Rome in sculpture and was lucky to spend 1975 and 1976 in Rome. Next. I think these next ones are going to go in a cycle, but these next two slides, this one and the next one, are pieces that I did when I went to New York. After Santa Cruz, I went directly to New York. I was lucky to become associated with Louis Mizell Gallery. And so the first two pieces are reminiscent of my time in the first years in New York. It was the guy sleeping on the bench was from Washington Square Park. And then the next piece was Dear Ladies of Thompson Street, which is the old Italian women who sit in the Italian South Village and keep their neighborhood safe. These next three pieces are from my 20th Century Cowboy series. This is broke down on the road to Cheyenne. The state of Wyoming, which has a bronc rider on the plate, was nice enough to make a license plate for me. This was my tour de force of that time. And it's a full-size Kenworth truck. And next. And this is a roadside diner where the truck drivers and cowboys all stopped for their meals. This last piece was a piece that I made in Rome, and it is also the last piece you'll see that doesn't have glass in it. For the 15 years after I got out of college, I worked in wood and bronze. I really love to draw, and drawing is an integral part of what I do. By the way, this piece is about Magritte, and today is his birthday. These are all drawings for sculptures that I made that you'll see later on down the line, but I wanted to show that drawing was the first stage of what it is that I do. And because I work in these noble materials that are reasonably unforgiving, there's a great deal of planning. And once the sculpture begins, there's not much you can do to go back and change things. Next, or let's wait till, there we go. This is a drawing that you saw in the video of Joseph Beuys, and
you have all these drawings still?
I do.
Good to know.
Actually, the drawing of Ai Weiwei is in the boys' bathroom and at the gallery.
Right, we have that one. That's for sure.
The other ones I do have here in my studio. This is my first glass piece. It was begun in the early 1980s, and it's about Imogen Cunningham. Now, the reason that it's glass is that she used an 8x10 view camera, and the negatives on the 8x10 view camera were on a glass plate. And so my idea was to portray her on a plate of glass, but I wasn't sure how to do that. And I was walking in Midtown Manhattan, and I saw a restaurant that had a window that had a sandblasted design in it. And I thought, now that's the way to go. So I went to the Yellow Pages and I called up a sandblasting. I looked for sandblasting and I called up blindly a studio and asked them if they would teach me how to sandblast glass so I could do this piece. And first thing they said was no. And I said, why? And they said, because every time we teach somebody, they open up a business right next, right in the same city and go into competition. And we've been doing this for 3 generations. And, we don't want that kind of competition from people who don't have the same skill set that we do. So I promised them that because I was an artist and I was only going to use it for my work, that I would not open a business. So they agreed to teach me. And I spent 2 years with them experimenting and going to their place and learning how to do this. And that was before I actually made the piece. So here we go. Next slide. I'm a big baseball fan, both Cubs and Yankees, having grown up in Chicago and lived for 20 some odd years in New York. And in 1979, Thurman Munson was killed in a plane crash. And the next day in the newspaper, there was a photo of Fred Stanley looking into the empty locker. And I thought that that would make a really incredible sculpture with some adaptations. And I used the format of a Topps baseball card as the image of Munson as the back of the locker. Next. This is the piece that I had begun when I met Karen. Karen, being a singer and musician, used to sing Lester Young solos while she was working with Connie Crothers, her teacher. And Lester Young was the greatest tenor bebop saxophone player. Next. This is one of my sculpture heroes, Ed Kienholz. He made a lot of figure environments, and one of his most famous pieces was Backseat 38 Dodge, which was a couple screwing in the backseat of a 1938 Dodge. And I did this as kind of an icon in the style of Russian icons, where the halo goes around the head of the saint. And in my mind, he was Saint Ed. And I had 2 real sculpture heroes in my career, and he was one, and George Siegel was the other one. Next. In New York, we lived across the street from the Lafayette Street Firehouse, and I grew to admire the firemen and decided to make a piece about them. It's in the New York City Fire Museum. This is Gandy Dancer. It's the title of the occupation of the guys who laid track for the railroad, and it's based on Edward Muybridge's sequential motion photographs of the same person swinging the sledgehammer. And it's in the Mint Museum in Charlotte, North Carolina, as part of their outreach program. Next. This is Rodia's Tower. It's a piece about Simon Rodia, who was an immigrant Italian tile setter who built 7 towers in the Watts section of Los Angeles. Each that are about 35 meters high, and they're built out of rebar, cement, and they're inlaid with broken pieces of glass and ceramics. And this piece is in the lobby of the Fort Wayne Museum of Art in Indiana. Pasionaria was the female leader of the Republican forces, political leader of the Republican forces against Franco in the Spanish Civil War. And she was basically the first woman to lead a political party in other than someone who is of royalty and got there by succession. Next. This glass blower is in museum in Switzerland. And it was my idea on this piece to build a three-dimensional volume figure out of flat pieces of glass. Next. This was a commission for the redevelopment of downtown Pasadena, California, which had fallen into disrepair. And the guy who developed Rodeo Drive, One Rodeo, bought this section and redeveloped it. And this piece was a symbol of the rebirth of the downtown section of Pasadena. And it presented a lot of challenges for me. It took me about 18 months to make this piece with all the life-size figures and the bronze casting and the fountain. And it also had to be earthquake proof. So below ground are spring set devices that were invented by John Luptow, who, in order so that if there was an earthquake, the piece would move and not break. Next.
I see there's somebody up on the pole too.
Yeah, that pole, the pole was there when I decided I'd put a figure in the pole, you know, up on the pole.
That's great.
Telephone lineman.
Mm-hmm.
Our first trip to France, we saw this guy who was repairing a bas-relief on a building with a cement trowel, and he was just completely nonchalant and totally fascinated me. So I decided I'd make a piece about him. Next. This was a commission to do a piece about cameo glass. And so I chose the Portland vase, which is first century Roman, and decided to do it from the perspective of the engraver. And by exploding the vase, you could see all of the relief on it. Next. This topping off ceremony was a commission for a New York City high-rise construction company, Jack Resnick and Sons. And the topping off ceremony involves a Christmas tree and an American flag, or a flag of whatever country. And it's when the last beam on the top floor of a building is swung into place. There's a little good luck ceremony. And it dates back to Germany in the 15th century when they raised the ridgepole on a barn. Next. This is a piece about poetry. It's Randall Jarrell is an American poet, and he wrote a poem called The Bronze David of Donatello. And it's the idea of making art about art that already exists, which is a lot of what I do. And it shows Gerald looking over the shoulder of Donatello, and it has elements of Donatello's David and some text from the poem. Next. This is self-portrait in the foundry. Next. This was a piece I did as a commission for Louis and Susan Mizell. It's at the entrance to their exotic tree garden. There's 200 or 250 varieties of exotic trees in this garden. And they commissioned me to do a sculpture at the entrance to it. And it shows a guy named Charlie Martyr planting a weeping elm tree. There's about 400 cast bronze leaves on the tree. This piece is glass. It's been outside for 30 years and it holds up beautifully. Maria Martinez, San Ildefonso Native American potter who's famous for her black on black work. And in the San Ildefonso tradition, women made the pots and men did the design. And when her husband died, she decided that I can do that. And she took over both aspects of it and is probably one of the most famous Native American potters in the United States. Next. That's in the, by the way, it's in the Gene Autry Museum of Western Art in Los Angeles. This is a piece about Jackson Pollock. It's in Ferd's house. Many of you have seen it. Basically, it's a piece, works from both sides. And it's based on a painting, number 29, that was done on glass. And it was for a film that Hans Namuth did, where they dug a pit and put a sheet of glass over, and Pollock painted on the glass while Namuth filmed from underneath the glass. Next. This was a commission for a house in Hollywood, in California, a fashion designer guy, and he just wanted a whimsy piece for his swimming pool. So I did that. Next. Fool's Crow, Frank Fool's Crow was a Lakota Sioux. He was a champion of Native American reclamation and rights. And again, one of my icon series with the halo going around his head. And he was actually born before the Lakota were put on the reservation. So he was one of the last freeborn Sioux. Next. Another piece based on a poem. This is by a poem by Ezra Pound called "In a Station of the Metro." And it shows 5 people sitting on, basically sitting on a metro bench. And by looking at them, you probably wouldn't know who they are, but they are Jean-Louis Barrault, a famous French actor, Emily Carrel, a French social advocate, Henry Moore, Jackson Pollock, and Canadian writer Robertson Davies. Next. This is from Van Gogh's Yellow Chair in the house in Arles, and it's just a striking image for me, that powerful chair, and so I decided to put him as part of it. Next. This is a piece about Charlie Parker, and Karen wrote the music that's in the background there. And it's a 12-bar blues. And as Lester Young was the greatest of the tenor players, Charlie Parker was the greatest of the alto players. Next. This is John Lewis. Karen also wrote the music that's in this piece. Both of them were homages to their respective musicians. John Lewis was the pianist for the Modern Jazz Quartet. And this was a group that kind of married classical music and jazz, and was really important to the jazz scene in the 60s. Next. This is the beginning of my torso series, and again, one of my sculpture heroes in the classical sense, Michelangelo. Next. Diego Giacometti is the brother of Alberto, somewhat less famous, but in his own right was an exceptional artist. Made a lot of really great furniture, cast bronze accoutrements, and also the leaf pattern was for a music stand. There's a little bird in the drawer on that piece. This is about Ousmane Sow, who is a Senegalese artist who is known for his larger than life-size village, African village scenes, and an extraordinary exhibit that he held on the Pont des Arts in Paris about the Little Bighorn. Next. a guy who made shadow puppets and fans for Balinese dancers. And he was an anonymous person, but he wore these this bent wire as glasses, but there was no glass in them. And somebody asked him why, and he said it helped him concentrate.
Interesting.
Next. This is about Louise Nevelson, who is an extraordinary artist and one of the very few women artists who really powered through in the days of the abstract expressionists and really created a huge space for herself. She was a neighbor of mine in Soho. This Giorgio Morandi, an artist who I really admire. He's like diametrically opposed to what I do. He's an Italian still life painter who used a series of 30 bottles as his life's work and just rearranged them and moved them around and created these theatrical environments with these bottles. Next. This is Robert Johnson, Mississippi blues man. And there's a legend that he sold his soul to the devil for the ability to be a great guitar player. And that occurred at the intersection of Highway 49 and 61 in Greenville, Mississippi. He's the first member of the 27 Club. For those of you who don't know what that is, it's musicians who have died at the age of 27, which includes Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison, Kurt Cobain, Amy Winehouse, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, next. Enough said. Frida Kahlo, one of the absolute greats. She was art. There's just no other way to put it. And the piece shows Diego and her spinal problems and her roots in Mexican culture, and a parrot, which is deals with it's a Hindu symbol of sexuality. And the last painting she did, she wrote was a still life with a watermelon, and she wrote "Viva la Vida" on the watermelon. Next. Marcel Marceau, French mime, great artist in his character of Bip. Next. This is the sculpture from the Magritte drawing that you saw earlier, and it incorporates several of Magritte's surrealist images. Next. Astor Piazzolla is an Argentine composer. He was trained as he started off as a bandoneon player in tango orchestras and then started composing. Went to Paris, studied with Nadia Boulanger, who is a famous piano teacher. And she said that to go back to the bandoneon, that was your instrument. And he began to compose what is known as Nuevo Tango, which is a mixture of tango and classical music. Next. This is Oscar Niemeyer, who's a Brazilian architect who designed Brasilia and co-designed the UN building in New York with Corbusier. He died at the age of 104 a couple of years ago with still 10 projects on his drawing board. He was still working at that age and was a remarkable man. It's also the cover of my book, Steve Linn, Documentary Sculpture. Next. Artemisia Gentileschi was one of the great Baroque painters. She is just now coming into her own and becoming well known, because at the time women painters were just ignored, and she went through a lot of trials and tribulations and was a follower of Caravaggio. Next. The Saints of the Beat Generation, Jack and Neil, The Odyssey of On the Road, Um, I was lucky to pay $1 and get the rights to use the text in the sculpture from the estate of Kerouac. Next. This was a commission for the frontispiece of the Shirley and Sherwin glass collection. And the idea was that it would be at the beginning of whatever, or incorporated into whatever museum their collection was donated to. It's in the Flint Institute of Art. And the idea was that it would show their love and also the love of a lot of the art that they collected. And there's elements of many of the pieces in their collection. The Noguchis, Dan Clayman, Bill Morris, Bertil, and Howard Bentray, Mary Schaffer. Next. This was one of the great experiences of my life. I did a commission for Hal and Myra Weiss on the Lubinskys, which is a huge part of their collection. And they actually gave me the opportunity to draw on their wall. So, and they also pushed me really hard to go beyond where I was coming from in the beginning of our discussions to where this piece actually ended up. Next. Jack and Leva, you recognize this. This is a piece based on the terracotta warriors of Xi'an in China, and of the 10,000 ceramic figures that were unearthed, there are only 8 faces that are repeated over and over and over again. So I did the 8 faces and then showed the figures in the back. Next. And we jumped many generations. So here we are with Banksy. And it basically, what I'm trying to do here is say that I love art from all generations, from all periods of history. And when I start on a piece, I want to, delve into the character of who it is and what they're doing. Next. This is about my my childhood. Maxwell Street, which doesn't exist anymore, was a street in Chicago of Jewish pushcarts and haberdashery stores, and it's also where Black musicians, blues musicians, played in the street. And it was a situation where the store owners and the musicians got along famously. And it also was where I got my first suit when I was 13 years old, and my father brought me down there. And it's the first time I heard the blues, and I have been a lifelong fan of the blues ever since. Next. Pete Volkus, he's the guy who took ceramics from pottery to art and fine arts and sculpture. He was a teacher initially at the University of California, Berkeley, and I was teaching at Santa Cruz. And I really admire him and his ability to have jumped from throne pots to these massive, massive ceramic sculptures. Next. Another West Coast guy, Lawrence Ferlinghetti, is a painter, a poet, owner of the City Lights bookstore, still going strong. He's 101 years old, and he still goes to his studio every day. Next, this is a commission based on education for Ed and Carol Kaplan. And the idea was the 3 inventors who had an amazing impact on mankind, and are Gutenberg, Edison, and Da Vinci. Next. This was my first hologram piece. It's Ai Weiwei, and I fell in love with holograms in the late, or in the early 1970s. There was a hologram museum on Mercer Street in New York, and I never figured out how I was going to incorporate them in my work. But it's somewhere in the back of my head, I always had that idea. And when I got this idea to do a piece about Ai Weiwei, at the time he was not allowed to leave China, so he was kind of imprisoned. And it was the idea that there was this three-dimensional image behind the wall. And these are first stage holograms, which means that the image is behind the glass, not in front of the glass. Next. This is the second hologram piece I did about Stephen Hawking. And these holograms are second stage holograms where they come out in front of the glass. And the three holograms are on his theories of the Big Bang theory, converging black holes, and singularity, which is a star disappearing into a black hole. Next. These are two of the greatest environmental artists of all time, Christo and Jean-Claude. And this piece is about a project of theirs that was never realized. It was called Over the River. It was supposed to be on the Arkansas River. And it was canceled on January 20th of 2017 for political reasons. Next. This is my neighbor, Jean-Michel Basquiat, at 101 Crosby Street in New York. He's a famous artist. Most of you know that. He lived on the third floor. We lived on the fifth. And when the elevator doors opened, you went directly into people's lofts. There was a big freight elevator. So I split him open as the elevator doors. And this was like one of his works straight ahead. Next. Carol Walker, tremendous artist of the current generation. She's very, very powerful in her work and in her capturing space when she has something to say, which is frequently. Next. Charlie Chaplin makes me laugh. And so I decided when the pandemic hit to do a piece about him. And this piece shows different aspects of films and from modern times, from Gold Rush, and the music is from a song called Smile, which made famous by Nat King Cole, but also written by Charlie Chaplin. And he wrote all the music for all of his films, even the silent films that were played on pianos live during the films. Next. This is a piece you saw in the video with Joseph Beuys. You've heard the explanation, so we'll just go on. Next. Yves Klein, great French artist who died too young, famous for the color blue. And there's a famous photograph of him jumping off of a wall into space. And of course, he dove into a mattress, but I had him diving into sponges that were part of his work. Next. And this was a commission that I did for Stephen and Marcia Funk, and it is the Masters of Their Medium, 7 of the great artists of the first 50 years of the studio glass movement. Dominic Lubino, Harvey Littleton, Dale Chihuly, Bill Morris, Lino Tagliapietra, the Lubinskis, and Bertil Bayen. Next. So this is some images of my website, and
this is what Steve Linn's recently redid his website, so you're all welcome to come explore it and check it out. A lot of the images that you've seen are on there, as well as the histories, works that have been sold. I feel like we can go museum hopping across America, I mean, even the world, and really experience Steve's pieces. So Thank you,
And
Steve.
if you're interested in any of the sizes of any of the pieces, all that's on the website, and much deeper and longer explanations of the pieces too. And also a lot of the stuff on the, that I showed today were bigger works, but I do smaller pieces, and I do accept commissions. And I love to do those, and of any size. So.
Yeah, definitely. Steve's done many commissions and made many people happy. So we'll talk about your upcoming Habitat Limited offering that is available today, Steve. So would you talk about your work before we show it?
Okay. Now, as I showed earlier, I love to draw, and I, for the most part, only draw for the sculptures that I'm making. So again, when the pandemic hit, Aaron came up with an idea. How about doing a limited edition print, an edition of prints based on an original drawing? So I thought, now that was a great idea. And I decided that Giorgio Morandi, who you saw one sculpture of, but I've also done a series of still lifes based on Morandi etchings also. And he's an artist that I extremely admire. And so I thought that I would do this edition of 25 prints based on Morandi himself and some of the bottles and dishes that were in his repertoire. So
this is the first time we're showing it. This is an exclusive for those who attend this meeting, so I'm glad you all are here to see this. We have worked together, Steve and I. Steve has drawn this amazing drawing. The photo doesn't do it justice. It's 30, I think it's 36 inches tall, not 32 as it mentions there. And it is an amazing presence when you see it in person. And so they're available. We have only 25 available, and they're unframed, and they're signed and numbered. So Steve actually drew this after a while, sent it to me. I had them printed. I sent the prints back to Steve in France to have him sign and number them and approve them. And now they're with us back in the gallery and available as of today. So
they were also printed by a very high quality fine arts printing firm that exclusively does art prints. It's not just going to your your local
print shop, right, Steve?
Print shop.
Steve has friends, and a friend of his, who was the friend that recommended?
Robert Sheffman.
Robert Sheffman recommended this print house, and so I was able to meet up with them and get this done. And so they are available as of today. They're $2,500 plus $30 shipping. So Steve and I talked today and wanted to give it an exclusive opportunity for those who attended this meeting to get it for $500 off. So it's $22,000 plus shipping. If you wanted it via the special offer, just give me a call or shoot me an email. I'd love to lock one up for you because there's only 25 available. And they accompany the Steve Linns you own, or if you don't have a Steve Linn, it's a great way to get Steve into your collection as a starting point. So there's also framing available. Debbie went and found a beautiful frame, and we had one framed at the gallery. And the frame raises the price a bit, $400 if you wanted it framed to $2,900, plus $250 shipping if you wanted us to do framing for you. And of course, the shipping code is for the lower 48 states. So it's an opportunity. It's something new and exciting, and they'll be up on our limited website. But if you want that deal for $500 off, just call me, email me. I'll make sure you get one. Oh, we have got more, Steve.
Yep. And these last slides are just what I've been working on. And I'm having a solo exhibition at the Fort Wayne Museum of Art starting in September of next year. Hopefully we'll all be vaccinated and we can meet up at that time, or maybe even before at the International if all goes well. But this is a piece about Anselm Kiefer, and it is a huge installation. The piece is 16 feet wide and 5 feet deep. And I'm making it especially for this museum show, along with another large installation piece, which I haven't begun yet, about Mark DeSubro. Next. There's just some of the elements of the piece. Those wings are 4 feet each. Next.
Wow, that's incredible.
I love to work. These are life-size dresses. They're flat and cast glass. Next, and this is a book of bas-relief Kiefer images that are in cast aluminum. I just got those, just did those.
That's cool. Very neat. Very. How big is that, Steve?
The book?
Yeah.
The book itself is 50 centimeters high. So
Okay.
50 centimeters is, I don't know.
Gotcha. All right, let me jump to the next thing. So thank you, Steve, for that presentation. Before we do any questions that people may have, I did post a link for the print now available on our website. I do want to make a quick note for next week's talk, which is next Saturday. We're visiting, you're coming with me to the Czech Republic and visiting two artists that are new to the Habatat family. They call themselves IRDS. I would love to pronounce their names, but I'm sure I'll learn it before the next show. Again, I want to thank Steve for joining us. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can see Steve and everybody together. And if everybody has any questions, this will be a great time to have a dialogue with Steve about that. I want to ask Steve a quick question about you have a lifetime worth of work out there, and there are different museums. Do you ever get a chance to go back and see pieces? Do people call you in for any particular reason?
Well, once in a great while, I've had to go back because somebody has broken something, sadly to say. But for the most part, you know, if I'm in a city where my work is, of course, I'll go. I just stop in and say hello to the people at the museum too, just because that's common courtesy.
Yeah.
But one of the things with a lot of my larger work is that if people wanted to give it to museums and stuff, it's difficult for a museum to keep it out all the time. So I've done this outreach idea where museums would give it to public spaces in their towns and put a sign that says this piece is part of the, so-and-so museum. The Mint Museum did that. And so it's in a public space. People see it all the time, and and then it says, this piece is part of the Mint collection. Come and see the rest of it.
That's great.
So
that's great to actually do that with the real piece. The DIA does that here with copies of prints they put up around town, and you can come see the real thing. So that's amazing that they actually do the real piece. That's really really cool to hear. Great. Well, anybody have any questions? Also, I would like to thank Steve for being here today, but feel free to chime in. I know Steve's a little later than us in France, so thank you again for joining us, Steve. It was great fun seeing everybody's face. And this, Jack, you got it.
Absolutely gorgeous. Really, I'm a fan of Steve for many years.
Yeah.
thanks, Jack.
Yeah, both a client-wise and a friend-wise. And we've seen Steve at every single show in SoFi and Art Palm Beach for the years we've been doing and hanging out with him. And are always glad to participate. He's helped out the gallery more than you can imagine with issues we had. He's a trained carpenter as well, so it's amazing to see what Steve can do. So if you have any questions.
Thank you for that beautiful presentation.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Steve.
Beautiful work.
So thank you, Steve, so much for being here today. Everybody has any questions, or else we'll say goodbye. And feel free to contact me anytime about the Limited or any of Steve's work. And he does commissions of all scale and size.
Nice to see you all.
Good to see you.
Thanks, Steve. That was brilliant. Absolutely.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everybody. Be well and stay safe. Talk to you all soon. Take care.
Thanks, Aaron. Thanks, Steve.
Great work.
Sorry.
Thanks, Corey.
Steve. Hey, Steve, it's Kenny.
Thanks again.
Hey, how you doing? I think I know you longer than anybody in the presentation.
Could be.
Since about second year of high school.